Shia Islam was not created by Rome. And so now we have this enemy of the papacy called Shia Islam. And even Suleiman the Magnificent fought against the Shia. Saladin fought against the Shia, according to the count. And so Shia are the target, because to have a unified Islam against the West, you have to neutralize the Shia peoples. Where do they live? They live in southern Lebanon, they live in Iraq, they live in Iran, they live in Afghanistan, and some of them live in, I believe, a portion of Somalia. That's only where the Shiites live. So, therefore, this crusade with, in 1960, we're going to 1960 now, the Jesuits had a very lovely university in Baghdad called Baghdad University. I believe it was the New York province, either the Maryland province or the New York province, that had established this Baghdad University in Iraq for the purpose, of course, training its leaders, and its leaders would then be subject to the papacy. In 1969, the Shia of Iraq expelled the Jesuit order from their country. Now that is very important.
Why did they do that? Because they're meddling in politics like they do here?
That's right, because they were meddling in their politics. So the Shia wouldn't put up with it. So they kicked them out. And some of the leaders then went down in airplane crashes shortly after that. In 1971, the Jesuits bring the Ba'ath Party to power and put Saddam Hussein in power. And what does he do? He persecutes the Shia people of Iraq. He involves them in the Iraq-Iranian war so the Shia can mutually kill each other. And all of this is financed by the U.S. Jesuit-controlled government, because if you read a tremendous book called, I think it's called Spider's Web, it's The Illegal Army of Iraq by Friedman. He shows you during the Reagan administration for 8 years that his administration armed both sides, Iraq and Iran, during the Iraq-Iranian war because they want to kill off all the Shia.
And you see some pictures that are still floating around of Donald Rumsfeld seeming very friendly with Saddam Hussein as they're shaking hands and wondering, I'm wondering what they're talking about behind the scenes, but I guess we can fill in the gap here. They're probably, again, fomenting war there, correct?
Absolutely. The Shia peoples of Iraq and Iran have to be brought down in order to completely unify Islam. It's just like you have to completely bring down all Protestant sects. Just like this heretic we heard about at the middle of the news broadcast. You have to bring down all Protestant sects and submit them to the Pope by the National Council of Churches, World Council of Churches, and you got to do the same thing with the Orthodox. You got to subject the Orthodox Christian Church to the primacy of the Bishop of Bishops in Rome. So they have the same principle applied to Islam. You must subject the Shia to the Pope of Rome, and since they won't submit, we have to kill them, and then they will submit to our Sunni leaders, and then our Sunni leaders will lead the way in the crusade against the West. So right now they are conducting a crusade against the Shia Muslims. We see this very same thing when Israel invades in 2006 into southern Lebanon. Of course, Hezbollah started it, but Hezbollah is run by the Knights of Malta. And the Knights of Malta run in Hezbollah with their hospital there in the border, according to the count, in southern Lebanon. They then recruit all the young Shia men to fight in Hezbollah, and then incite Israel to come and invade southern Lebanon, which they never won, and kill the Shia people. So it's a war on the Shia of all fronts. I believe when they detonate Detroit, there's the largest Shia Muslim population in the United States in Detroit. They're going to go up in smoke. It's all a crusade now against the Shia.
I want to talk about that, what you just said about Detroit. But first, just give us just a little bit of background. So we have the papacy creating Islam. How did this schism happen? Why did the Shiites rebel against the papacy? What was the main reason there that you found out?
As I perceive it, the papacy, being in control of Muhammad, wanted to continue its absolute control over Islam after his death with his successor that succeeded him, that was a Sunni. I can't remember his name right now. And with this Ali laying claim to being the descendant of Muhammad, the Muslims who followed him, they became what is called Shia. And this now was totally out of control of the papacy. Papacy now is losing control of this sect called the Shia through Ali. And so the Jesuits now in control of the Jesuit papacy have to rid the Islam of this schism so that Islam can be united for the purposes of the papacy. And one of those purposes is to be used against North America.
I think looking at, the Jesuits thrown out of Iraq, we have our domestic and foreign policy we see the ties between Spellman back in the Vietnam War, and we move our way into now this war on terror after communism falls, and that is orchestrated as well. But just for just a refresher course, people may not be able to get their mind around how our government, how the Jesuit order can create a terrorist organization that can work its way into America, do the damage they've done on 9/11, and then create this whole propaganda campaign that the people of Islam are all behind this, so that they can whip up a war between the two. So tell us how this is funded, how they can operate this way, how the Jesuit order really works behind the scenes, so that when people present this premise, they can back it up. Because most people in America still believe that the Jesuits have nothing to do with 9/11. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Okay, to begin with, we have to remember there weren't any Muslims on those airplanes. The airplanes were empty. Those airplanes were guided into the buildings by the military-industrial complex of this country. And as I've said for 10 years now, George J. Tenet, Knight of Malta, the DCI at the time, Director of Central Intelligence, a Roman Catholic trained by Jesuits at the Georgetown School of Foreign Service, he was the mastermind of 9/11. So therefore, this Knight of Malta, George J. Tenet, his master at the time then, was the head of the federal branch of the Knights of Malta, which at the time was Edward Cardinal Egan. Edward Cardinal Egan was the Archbishop of New York City. He's now been replaced by Timothy Dolan. And so Edward Cardinal Egan was the Darth Vader, was the overseer of the entire 9/11 scenario using his DCI, George J. Tenet, just as Cardinal Spellman was the overseer of the assassination of JFK using his Knight of Malta DCI, John McCone. It's the same system, but with different players. Now, with this 9/11 that they brought about, they then justified a crusade into Afghanistan in the following month. Afghanistan was invaded on October 7th, 2001. October 7th is a very important day in history because it's on October 7th, 1571, that the Battle of Lepanto was fought between the forces of Suleiman the Magnificent and the Holy Roman Emperor with his Knights of Malta and the Jesuits. And the Battle of Lepanto in 1571 is considered the most important sea battle in world history, second only to the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, when Octavian defeated Cleopatra's fleet and then went down to Egypt, killed her, and took over the kingdom. So this Battle of Lepanto is extremely important for the listeners to remember, because on October 7th it took place. Suleiman was defeated. The Middle East was opened up to the Crusaders once again. And it's on this very same October 7 day that the U.S. invades Afghanistan. So they start the crusade of 7th, 2001, against the Shia of Afghanistan, primarily. So that's kind of where it starts, and so now here we have it. And then the other thing I want to stress is that because the vast majority of white people in this country are ignorant as to these historical facts, they are successfully being herded into right-wing white Jesuit fascism. I just saw a guy emailed me a truck with a bumper sticker on it, and it has the Twin Towers burning. He said, I learned all that I need to know on 9/11. I learned all I need to know on Islam about 9/11. And there was a redneck somewhere down in the South somewhere. He had a Confederate flag, and he had this painted on the back of it. And I thought, this is exactly what they're doing. They're inciting these people, these white people primarily, to unite under a fascist resistance and fight this crusade because they refuse to believe that 9/11 was an inside job of this government.
Exactly. And then if we start really looking behind the scenes and looking at all the facts that prove that, we have to go one step farther and then decide, and try to uncover who was behind it and how they orchestrate these things. And that's where it's very important to begin to look at the Jesuit order behind the scenes, and all of their shenanigans throughout the course of history seems to be forgotten by the American people, and this is why they can get away with it. You make a fact in your book, Vatican Assassins, that they've been kicked out of over 80 countries in world history, and this is only since the 1530s when they were formed, correct?
Yeah, from the 1540 to, about 1931, according to Jesuit